All right, hi everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. We're all very excited to present this webinar on The Sky is Falling, Precipitation Observations and their role in understanding the Earth system. But before we get started, I'd like to give a brief introduction on the AGU Atmospheric Science Early Career Committee. And so this committee is formed to provide resources for and creates and promotes professional activities for early career students or early career scientists, including students. And we wanted to give everyone a heads up that this webinar in particular is part of an ongoing series. And the next webinar will be held in sometime in late July, early August of 2024. And if anyone is interested in giving a talk, we ask that you please submit your abstract for consideration using the link here, and then it will also be posted in the chat. And then in general, we also have other events from our other subcommittees within our early career committee. And to find out about them, we encourage you to keep an eye on the atmospheric science section newsletters, as well as our X and also our new Instagram for upcoming events. And then also we just ask that if there's any questions or suggestions about this or anything in general related to the early career committee, that you can always reach out with our email. If you have any feedback for today's webinar, there's the link also listed here. And then you can always visit our website as well, which has previous recordings of our other webinars. And then I also want to note that the current meeting will be recorded, so it can go on our website and then also the AGU YouTube channel. And so we're really excited to present our speakers and moderator today. We're very grateful for their time and effort in giving these talks. And I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's webinar. Dr. Yongji Huang currently works as a research scientist at the Center for Analysis and Prediction of Storms, or CAPS, at the University of Oklahoma. His current research focuses on cloud and precipitation-related dynamics, microphysics, and their interactions, and is to advance the fundamental understanding of cloud and precipitation-related processes and their roles in water and energy cycles across scales. And so with that, Dr. Yongji Huang, if you'd like to introduce our first speaker.
Okay, thank you for the kind introduction. Yeah, today we have two speakers, and the first speaker is Patrick Ornstein. Patrick is a PhD candidate in the Department of Applied Physics and Applied Mathematics at Columbia University. His research focuses on the climatic process in the tropics and their effect on global global climate. And today, Patrick are going to talk about the convective storm drops, constraining a possible moderator of the effect of climate change on extreme rainfall using satellite wind retrievals. Patrick, please.
Thank you. And sorry about the title. I really so I made it a little shorter. So this is thanks for having me. I wanted to just talk about, this is part of my PhD work that is part of NASA GIS's broader project of using different observational data that hasn't been used for modeling, for model evaluation before, to give a new perspective on how well their model is doing extreme events like extreme storms. So as he said, the focus is convective downdrafts. It's nice to talk to an atmospheric group for once, but I'll just say that cold pools are, as people know, the residual air left at the surface by downdrafts from intense storms. So they're created by a combination of the latent cooling caused by falling air re-evaporating and the drag on the air by falling rain. So since they're colder than their surroundings, they collapse and spread out and push up the air around them. And the picture on the right shows you that sometimes they can pick up some moisture from the sea surface, and you get these nice circles that outline them from a visible satellite view. Now, as climatologists, or climate scientists rather, we're interested more in cold pools for their effect on rainfall. Like I said, through that spreading and action, they push up the surrounding air, and so through that and a couple other mechanisms, they can actually generate new clouds and act as a kind of positive feedback that generates another generation of clouds and another generation of rainfall, another generation of clouds. And the diagram on the right is from a nice paper from a few years ago that did a really nice job of making a very clear little diagram that shows you how these two example clouds, which are near each other, even as the clouds die out, the cold pools that are left over run into each other, combine and create a new cloud. So, in the spirit of bringing a new data to brain on this, we noticed that most previous work on this topic is either small scale models. So the image on the left is an example. You can see the X and Y axes are 96 kilometers. So that's sort of the scale of a cloud resolving model. And then the right is a composite of what it feels like for a cold pool to pass over a ship. So this is an observational paper. You can see you get the coldness at the top. You get a sudden dip in temperature. And third down, you get a sudden wind gust, which is the expansion. And so basically, we wanted to bring a global perspective that we can then use to evaluate things like climate models. So for that, we're going to use satellite observations, specifically observations of ocean surface winds from Garg et al. Collaborator Piyush Garg identified what he called gradient features. So the outflowing air from the convective downdraft, which is shown in the blue arrows in this diagram from his paper, when it runs into the relatively constant regional air, shown in red, you can track that gradient that forms. And so an example is this diagram on the bottom right, where using wind data, his algorithm has generated these blue polygons when they seem to line up well with this precipitation intensity, which is the color, and it gives you a sense of how it's showing you the outline just outside of these intense storms. This is in the Caribbean. So here's a climatology of the occurrence of detecting these gradient features over a 9-year period. And it's colored by average number of gradient features detected per month. And the top is December, January, February. The bottom is June, July, August. And it won't come as a surprise to people to see a alignment with the places you think of as being convectively active, like the intertropical convective zone. So as you can see, the problem with the scatterometer data is that it's limited to the ocean, since it's the ocean surface that you're measuring to get the wind vector. So now here's when you go to combine it with some other satellite data sets. So middle is IMERGE rainfall, and the bottom is AIR's climatology of column relative humidity or moisture saturation and integrated moisture saturation. And so what becomes interesting is the alignments and the misalignments. So in the East Pacific, we have interesting but unsurprising alignment between intense rainfall, intense high column relative humidity, and intense high frequency of gradient features along the equator between pretty much across the Pacific. But you can see, well, an interesting exception that jumped out to us was both off the coast of South America and off of the Bay of Bengal. You see intense rainfall, extremely high column relative humidity, and not as high counts of gradient features as we would have expected based on the other regions we were looking at. So to explain what I'm saying in a slightly different point of view, if we make a joint distribution of the number of gradient features by rainfall on the y-axis and column relative humidity on the x-axis, so the mean rainfall for each column relative humidity is shown by the black dashed line. And you can see that particularly in the summer, where you get the most, globally, where you get the most gradient features is between 60 and 70% column relative humidity and above 10 millimeters per day rainfall rates. And that's when you go to look at separating out the Southern Indian Ocean and the Southern Indian Ocean and the Northern Indian Ocean, you see that in the Southern Indian Ocean, you have a roughly similar distribution in terms of where the red shows up and where the blue shows up. But then when you look at the Northern Indian Ocean summer, you see a much higher spread of rainfall rate, a much higher spread of column relative humidity, but not that intense gradient feature count. So this was interesting to us, obviously. And so we went looking in some other places. So here is rainfall again. So now this is still iMerge satellite climatology of rainfall and divided by seasons. And I've also put on it the 60% and 70% lines of constant humidity. Now, basically just the point I want to make with this is that they pretty much align with their seasonal movement. Again, surprising to no one. But then the quantity I wanted to use as a kind of proxy for what we're talking about is precipitation divided by the gradient feature count. And plotting that, I think is nice because suddenly we have some other regions lighting up that we didn't notice were weird before. Again, we already noticed that the Bay of Bengal in June, July, August is weird in so much as it's an extremely high precipitation divided by gradient feature count. And but then we also see that there's a misalignment and an extremely high area in the East Pacific in December, January, February. And you can also see that those patterns don't line up necessarily with the movement of the column relative humidity bands with the seasons. Now, finally, let's spread that out by column relative humidity. So basically, here's what that looks like if you bin it on the x-axis by column relative humidity. So this is a big result. So let's take a second to walk through it. So again, precipitation as a function of column relative humidity is in blue. That is flat and then starts to rise slightly around 40-50% column relative humidity and then levels out in December, January, February, and June, July, August, it continues to rocket up until the end. So Now that is consistent with everyone who's read about that kind of thing, Brotherton and back, and but let's compare that to this new quantity, precipitation divided by gradient feature count, and it starts rising quicker below 40% relative humidity, flattens out, and then rises again at the end. So this is interesting because it lays out a situation in which you have multiple regimes of the relationship between column relative humidity and precipitation. You have one regime where precipitation is related to as precipitation increases, you get a relatively a corresponding a relatively slow increase in gradient features. Then above a certain point, you get a high rate of creating gradient features such that precipitation per gradient features almost levels off. But then at a high, really high column relative humidity, suddenly the rate goes up again. And that could explain, we think, those regions with low column relative humidity, but relatively anomalously confusingly low numbers of gradient features. So with that, I'll just wrap up and say that basically our analysis is that cold pool activity shows at least two regimes relative to rainfall rate, which are modulated by relative humidity. That relative humidity threshold is consistent seasonally, is about 60%, which is interesting to us. And basically, we feel like this is not a first time proof of concept, but another proof of concept that interesting global data can give us new perspectives on mechanisms which occur over a variety of scales. So I just want to thank funding from NASA, my advisors, Adam Sobel, Susanna Camargo, and Craig Elsasser, and our collaborators here. And thank you for listening.
Thank you for Patrick for the interesting talk. Let's see any questions. Yeah, please, if any questions, please raise your hand to, just unmute yourself to ask, or just post the question in the chat. Let's see.
No one?
Yeah, I can take opportunity to ask questions.
Okay.
Yeah, Patrick, I was wondering how high the resolution of the satellite being retrievable for your study to recollect the cold pool in.
Yeah. So the satellite itself has a resolution of, I think, 12 kilometers. So then in order to create a polygon, you need 4 of those. It has to be at least that big, which is on the bigger side of the convective cold pools that you see in like a calm resolve, a high resolution model. And so definitely that's one of the reasons we took the approach of aggregating them as opposed to each one, like co-locating each one with individual values proved both difficult and less fruitful because it didn't answer the questions we wanted to ask.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And I see. Dia, go ahead.
Hi, Patrick. Thank you for the very nice presentation. I wanted to know whether the El Nino or the La Nina conditions have an effect on the gradient frequency distributional values.
Yeah, I mean that's a big problem with the it being a 9-year time series is I haven't looked at that, and that would be, I think, that actually, unfortunately, we were trying to figure out, we wanted to use an even shorter data set from another satellite. We're actually trying to avoid seeing the effect of El Nino and La Nina. So I don't have it off the top of my head, but we spent a lot of time avoiding it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, okay, I see another question on the chat box from Alisa. And can you talk a little more about how you define the number of gradient features? The global numbers seems very small compared to the number of couple I would expect to the topics. I may have misunderstood the numbers though.
Let me read that. Oh yeah, so there's a couple questions, couple points there. One, so the satellite passes over every point once, twice a day. So we get an instantaneous snapshot of everywhere in the tropics twice a day. Secondly, there's error, I'm blanking on the name. Anyway, a quality control for if there's extreme cloud cover, and obviously the tropics have more extreme cloud cover than other places. And then you have the compounding effect of when we say number of cold pools, as you can see, let me show you that diagram here. If you look at the bottom one, so that's the big blue, Italy boot shaped one in the middle. I think pretty clearly that's not the downdraft outflow from a single cumulonimbus storm. So, but that's seeing the outside of like a mesoscale convective feature and drawing that as one gradient that's meeting the regional flow. So there are some of those big ones that are sort of going to obscure the total count. And there's the issue of the satellite coverage. And there's the issue of some quality control. So I agree. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. Patrick, and questions. Yeah, if you have more questions, we can ask later. Yep. And now let's go to the second speaker, Dia Das. Dia is the first year PhD student in the atmospheric science group at the Department of Geoscience at Texas Tech University. Her research focused on the comparison between the satellite-based remote sensing precipitation and the high-quality ground-based measurements, and especially focused on the region, the dry-rain region in the US. And today, Diaz will present the titles "Witnessing Ray from the Terrestrial to Celestial Rings." Dia, please.
Thank you for the very nice introduction. I'm a first year, good afternoon everyone. I'm a first year PhD student. I've joined the PhD program last fall. And today I'll be talking about my preliminary results. So as the title suggests, witnessing rain from terrestrial to celestial realms, I'll be speaking about the understanding and observation of precipitation from a dual approach, that is a bottom-up ground-based and a top-down satellite-based approach. But before I start, I would like to acknowledge NASA for sponsoring the S3 map, that is the Synergistic Surface-Based and Satellite-Borne Measurements of Arid Region Aerosol and Precipitation Project, under which this work is carried out. I would also like to thank National Wind Institute, Texas Tech University, and West Texas Mesonet, and also my research colleagues for this support. Global climate change, a profound concern within the scientific community, being the most discussed and researched topic due to its profound global implications. The 7 major effects of climate change are hotter temperatures, more severe storms and flash flooding, increased drought, a warming as well as a rising ocean, loss of species, food scarcity, more health risks, poverty, and displacement. The picture that we can see in this slide represents the projected changes of annual daily maximum temperature, annual mean total soil column moisture, and annual maximum one-day precipitation at global warming levels of 1.5, 2, 3, and 4 degrees C relative to the pre-industrial era. Now you can see that apart from a severe change or severe rise in the annual daily maximum temperature, there's also a global rise in the annual maximum wettest day precipitation estimates, even in regions where soil column moisture is declining. So all these changes will have a severe impact in all aspects of life, from daily lives to governmental policies. So climate change affects all ecological zones, but especially drylands. But for that, we need to know what are drylands and why are they so important to us. According to the United States Geological Survey, drylands are arid and semi-arid zones around the world where water resources are very scarce, that is, precipitation is very, very less. So 46.2% of the Earth's land surface and 40% of the US land surface is considered drylands. Around 3 billion people of the world inhabit these drylands. According to the UN Habitat, 18.5% of the population growth rate in drylands is faster than any other ecological zones. So this map represents the aridity index maps of US, and this has been developed from the Global Aridity Index and Potential Evapotranspiration Database. We can see that the southwestern part of the US can be majorly categorized into hyper-arid, arid, and some portions of semi-arid regions. And this is primarily our study area. So as I mentioned earlier, that climate change affects all ecological zones, but drylands especially, due to their heightened sensitivity to climate change. As climate change persists, severe storms are becoming more frequent worldwide. And these drylands do not have the adequate infrastructure to cope up with these storms. For example, we can see that due to a flash flooding event that occurred on 1st June of 2023, that was led by a heavy torrential downpour, 2 highways were closed, roads were closed, and multiple vehicles were trapped due to flooding. This is very typical for semi-arid regions such as the Texas Panhandle, where there is lack of adequate drainage system to cope with flooding. The picture on the lower panel of the slide represents the drastic change that a dryland can go through with over a foot of rain and that occurred over 5 weeks. So looking at this scenario, it's quite understood that we need to have good quality measurements of precipitation that will give us an understanding of the spatial and temporal variability of precipitation over drylands. Now, precipitation is one of the most toughest meteorological parameters to measure and understand because of that high spatial variability and temporal variability. So globally, precipitation can be measured through rain gauges, disdrometers, radars, and satellite. Ground-based measurements like rain gauges and disdrometers provide the most accurate information about precipitation. But here also we face a lot of challenges due to the uneven distribution and limited coverage over remote areas. Now to also ensure that these gauges represent the regional climate perfectly, the gauges needs to be strategically positioned, which is not often done. Disdrometers and radars also share similar limitation and retrieval issues. But here comes satellite remote sensing that has transformed precipitation measurement, providing high resolution global coverage, especially in regions like drylands where continuous ground-based monitoring is lacking. So one of the recent high quality and high resolution database that we have of precipitation is from the Global Precipitation Measurement Mission. It is a successor of the Tropical Rainfall Measuring Mission, TRMM. So the GPM offers enhanced accuracy and coverage and dynamic range in global precipitation measurements. So one of the products of the GPM is the IMERG, which Patrick was talking about. It provides both near real-time as well as post-real-time data with a high spatial resolution of 0.1 degree, which is almost 10 kilometers, and at temporal scales of 30 minutes daily and monthly scales. So what the IMERG does is it combines passive microwave and infrared estimates of precipitation from a number of sensors which are present in the GPM constellation to provide high resolution spatial and temporal data sets. So the figure B represents one of the latest half-hourly IMERG global precipitation of today at around 7:30 a.m. So for this study, we have used the monthly final run version 7 IMERG product that is available from 2000 to 2023. So apart from providing spatially continuous data, what satellite remote sensing does is it also provides a long database of precipitation estimates, which is very useful for climatological studies. So in this slide, we can see that at a single snapshot, we can see 21 years of data for the month of May from 2003 to 2023. The green box represents the domain over which IMERG were analyzed, that is the semi-arid Southwest US. Similar to gauge or surface-based measurements, satellite retrievals also have their issues. Despite providing precipitation estimates with consistent spatial and temporal scales, they are susceptible to a lot of retrieval errors, systematic biases, random and systematic errors, as well as errors that arise due to interpolation techniques and errors that arise due to algorithms. So to first use these satellite derived estimates, we need to validate it against highly accurate ground-based measurements. So for this study, we have the Pierce rain gauge that was set up at the Reach Technological Center as a part of the S3MAP project for ground-based measurement observations. Also, we have the West Texas MeasureNet, which has more than 150 stations in the Texas Panhandle, which will provide us highly dense, spatially dense measurements from ground-based sensors, which is represented in figure B. And figure C represents the total monthly precipitation recorded at 146 sites for the month of May 2022. So for my research objectives for this study are to perform comparison between ground-based observation and satellite-borne measurements of precipitation towards quantifying biases involved in satellite retrievals. We will be then trying to understand the effect of meteorological factors and aridity factors that affect these biases. And finally, we'll try to investigate the spatial and temporal variability of precipitation across the semi-arid regions of West Texas. And we'll also try to find out how well the satellite data is able to capture this spatial and temporal variability. So now I will be discussing the preliminary results from objective 1. So here we can see that figure A represents WTM measurements of monthly accumulated precipitation in millimeters for the month of May 2019. And figure B represents the IMERG retrieved monthly accumulated precipitation over the same region for the same time period. So this is our intercomparison framework. Figure C represents the interannual variability in observed monthly accumulated precipitation for 4 consecutive years, that is 2018 to 2021. And the blue box plots represents WTM measurements or ground-based measurements, and the red box plots represents IMERG observations. We can see that the considerable interannual variation is observed between 2018 with a median of 35.3 millimeters to 2021, median of 119.6 millimeters. There's an overall overestimation by IMERG for 18 to 20, but it underestimates for the year 2021. Now to get a closer look at this bias, here we have analyzed the biases in satellite retrievals by comparing them comparing monthly accumulated precipitation between WTM and IMERG estimates. But when I say bias, I mean the difference between IMERG and WTM, or satellite minus ground-based measurements. So the figure A represents a scatter plot which compares monthly accumulated precipitation from IMERG versus WTM. The colors represent the difference between IMERG and WTM, and the blue dotted line is the 1:1 line. In figure B, we have tried to analyze the bias with respect to the ground-based observations from WTM in order to find out the relation between the bias and the ground-based measurements. And in figure C represents the frequency distribution and the associated PDF of the biases. So we have analyzed 3 cases. The first case represents that of May 2015, where the precipitation was anomalously very high, and certain stations in the West Texas witnessed monthly accumulated precipitation up to 400 millimeters. The second case was that of a very low precipitation month, where the maximum recorded monthly accumulated precipitation was around 100 to 125 millimeters. And the third case was that of a medium precipitating month, where the monthly accumulated precipitation was that between 200 to 250 millimeters, and that was for May 2019. So the preliminary outcomes show that satellite retrievals reveals both positive and negative biases. That is, it both overestimates for certain stations and underestimates for certain stations. But for each case, more than 50% of the stations showed that the satellite was overestimating. We also found a dependence of the biases on precipitation regime and intensity. The negative correlation coefficient between the retrieval bias and the ground-based measurements in each case indicates that there's a propagation of error from low to high precipitation. The presence of a negative skewness for each of the histogram indicated the presence of a low frequency and strongly negatively biased values. In simple terms, we can say that there was a higher percentage of locations showing overestimations, but a higher magnitude of underestimation was observed, but for a very lower fraction of locations. So for future, we'll be investigating the error propagation's sensitivity to several interpolation techniques. And we'll also try to understand the meteorological and the aridity factors which may be behind these biases, and also try to quantify the relation between precipitation intensity and retrieval bias. So as I mentioned earlier, that this work is a part of the S3MAP project, which is sponsored by NASA. So this project has 2 components, the precipitation component, which I spoke earlier, and it also has an aerosol component. So we have also been doing outreach educational programs. So here we can see that a bunch of high school students visited the Reese Technological Center to understand the ongoing project and the 2 instruments, that is the GPM and the CIMELF sun photometer for aerosol, that are installed at Reese, and to make them aware of the current scenario. Thank you.
Thank you, Dia, for the interesting talk. It's time for the question. If you have any question, raise your hand or put them in the chat.
Hi, Dia.
Hello.
BZ here. So this is cool. I love seeing like real world data being collected to do some of this model or satellite verification. I'm wondering, with all of the implemented stations, can you just go like, what are some of the main difficulties you've run into, like working with both collecting and maybe even working with some of that like observed data?
So with the satellite data, there's not much of a problem because it is directly uploaded to the server, the NASA server, from where we can directly download it. With the ground-based measurement, there are, because the number of stations over West Texas measurement is quite high. It's like 150 stations. So one of the major problems are the number of station is increasing year by year. For example, for the year 2022, there were 146 stations, and then for 2019 it was 140 stations, and now it's more than 150 stations. So the number of stations, as the number of stations increases, the analysis changes. So, and then some old stations are, because a lot of manpower is required to for the proper working of these stations. Some of the old stations has a lot of missing values. So like these are some of the problems that I found when I was working with the ground-based data.
Yeah, and sorry, just a follow-on question, then
Yeah,
someone
sure.
ask one. So that I think that's almost what I was getting at. What is the quality control something that's like within the responsibility of your team, or is that supposed to be done up front? And have you found that you feel like the quality control has been sufficient, or is that something that could use more attention?
Quality control is sufficient, though it's not done by our team, it's done by the West Texas Mesonet. Though the older data sets have a significant number of missing values, the current data sets do not have that. And I think the quality control is sufficient in those terms.
Cool. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Dia.
So
I have a question. I'm sorry.
go ahead. Yeah,
Yeah.
please.
Hi, Dia. This is Piyush.
Hi.
So I had a question with the, yeah, it was a cool presentation, and I had a question with the ground-based observations, particularly for
Thank
the
you.
precipitations, because normally the instrument what we use for the collecting the precipitation informations are very sensitive to the droplets.
Yes.
And we have a lot of so as you discussed that you're gonna in the future you're gonna discuss about the error propagations and the biases between the satellite and ground-based observation, but how do you rectify the issues in the ground-based observations, like because of the dust particle also cause some error measurements in the precipitation instruments. Even the flying birds also has affect the ground-based radar. The precipitations which does not reach to the surface also have some impact on the satellite measurements, but not to the ground-based measurements. So this kind of bias is how you are gonna pointing out in your error propagation.
So I think
research.
these are very minute and very region specific, precipitation not coming down to the ground and the effect of birds and all. These are very minute and region specific errors that might affect the ground-based measurements, and these might affect only one or two stations, but not the entire 146 stations. So as of now, we are not considering these into the analysis. We'll be first looking at the broad analysis about how broadly over all the 146 stations the biases change with time or with type of precipitation, and then we might look into this as well.
Got it, but still, like most of the stations are in the semi-arid regions. So semi-arid regions have a lot of impact of dust, what we actually have seen via our observations. So I think at least you have to identify the impact of dust on your instrument and the precipitation. So yeah.
So thank you for the suggestion. We'll take it into account in our analysis.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, any other questions? Yeah, I can ask one more. And yeah, from the figure you show in a slide showing the spatial distribution of the ground-based measurement, I found there's more dense station in the north, but there's very poor resolution in the south. Yes. Yeah. Do you consider any the sample bias due to the core resolution of the station in the south?
Could you kindly repeat your question?
I mean, do you consider there's some sample bias due to the core resolution of station in the south?
Oh yeah, so because of the less resolution of the less samples of the West Texas Mesonet sites towards the south of Texas, we have only limited our analysis to the northern part or the densely populated part of the Texas Panhandle.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think it's time to wrap up. Yeah, today the two speakers both use use the application of the different satellite products, use the products for their different aspects of the studies. And yeah, Patrick's study mainly focus on convective dump drops, especially the cold pool using the satellite retrieval surface beam, and to understanding the stone precipitation and the column relative humidity. And the other was underscore important to recap how the accurate precipitation measurement and also and compared to the ground-based observation. So now we can open the floor for the further. Oh, sorry. Yeah, for the further questions, if you have any question for the two speaker, yeah, please raise your hand and or type them to the chat box. Yeah.
I guess I've got a question that I'm just interested in the two speakers' opinions on. When like, and maybe you get a sense of my theme thinking about observational data, satellite data, all versus modeling data. What do you think is, I guess for your particular case, like what is the biggest limitation in the data set that you're using, and what do you think is the biggest advantage or benefit to the data set that you're using?
Yeah, I think these are great questions. Patrick, okay, Patrick, go ahead.
Please. No.
Yeah, Patrick, yeah, you can go
Okay.
first.
Yeah. I say that they sort of come hand in hand with the satellite data I'm using is the cost benefit. The benefit is that it's global. So that's the novel part and has proven pretty revealing. The problem is we're studying what is a dynamic phenomenon with a data set that only shows single glimpses in time, single snapshots in time. And so, I want to combine that with some kind of, people, I think literally every person who I explain this to says, can't you also track that on geostationary so you can keep seeing where it goes? And I'm like, I know.
Literally just crossed my mind. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, I want to do that too, but it's tricky, man. And so that's what your question made me think of.
Yeah, well, sorry, and just a follow on before Dia answers. Like what's missing from the geostationary satellite? Like, is it just not have the bands or the channels that you need to study that phenomena, or
Yeah, I don't believe they have a microwave scatterometer. Although if I'm wrong about that, then I but it's funny, the diagram I showed, the image I showed on the first or whatever it was, where you can sometimes see a cold pool in terms of its what they call the moisture ring, right? But that's sort of the very end of the cold pool, and it's very like that's from a review paper, so that's like the perfect instance of it just showing up so perfectly in visual spectrum.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Cool. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so as Patrick mentioned, like the advantage with satellite data is it's global, it's long term. Like we can have 20 years of data at hand at once. But one of the major problems is spatial and temporal resolution. Like the IMH dataset, which I use, in terms of satellite datasets, it's a high resolution dataset that is 0.1 degree, but still it's 10 kilometers. Like the precipitation type intensity will obviously vary in major parts of the globe through 10 kilometers. Relative to which ground-based measurements are very accurate. But then another problem with the ground-based measurements is they are not available globally, and it requires a lot of manpower to like clean them and for their operation. So both of them have their individual advantages and disadvantages, and that's why we are trying to like incorporate both of them so that we can get more accurate estimates of precipitation. And the follow-up question about the geostationary satellite. I think geostationary satellite majorly uses visible and infrared bands, but then the algorithm that visible and infrared bands apply is like they check the cloud top height, cloud top temperature, and cloud growth rate, which are not very accurate parameters to understand whether a cloud is precipitating or not, where microwave gives us a way more accurate estimate.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
okay, yeah. First, thank you the answer and the questions. And especially we need to aware of the uncertainty, both observation, the different products, not only the satellite, ground-based, and other remote sensing products. We need to understanding the uncertainty of this data, and also the uncertainty of the model data, and how to consider this uncertainty, and then to make sure that this uncertainty not influence our conclusion. That's very important. Yeah. And any other questions for the two speakers?
I just want to add one a comment on the Diya's answer about the geostationary. So there are some microwave available on the geostationary too, and they are also trying to retrieve the precipitation information. But the issue with the geostationary is that they are at the 36,000 kilometers, so it is difficult to, or it is very challenging to retrieve the precipitation information at the resolution what we need to track the information about the precipitation. So that's the issue. But yeah, now the NOAA and the other organization has started working on developing the more sensitive instrumentation, microwave imager for the precipitation instrumentation. So probably in the near future we'll have something very good from the geostationary. But yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Cool.
I was wondering, so there's this extensive ground-based network in Texas, right, that you're working with. Do you think what you learn from that will be able to be applied in areas that don't have ground-based observations to basically correct the estimate? I mean, is that kind of the overall goal?
So, like it depends. If the climatology of the area is similar, like it's a similar semi-arid region, and also it depends upon the geography. Like if the geography is similar, then it might. But if the if the geography is different, depending upon the placement of the mountains and the climatologically it's a different zone, then it might not.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. Other questions? Let me see. Troubles. No. Yeah, and I have a question for Dia. You know there are other satellite precision products. For example, from the NOAA, they have the CMO and other. Maybe I remember also their product combine a different satellite and also ground-based observation. So it's possible for you to collect all the different satellite precision product to understand the uncertainty of the satellite retrievals. It's possible to do that.
Yeah, that's possible. That's also possible to like compare IMERG with other satellite satellite precipitation products and see which is performing best over the West Texas. But we have chosen IMERG because of its spatial as well as its temporal resolution, because it provides data at 30 minutes intervals. But yeah, that's also possible.
Okay, yeah. So, and yeah, thank you for your answer. And also, I have another question for Patrick. And yeah, I saw you talk to examine the relationship between the precipitation and the column relative humidity. And I was wondering how they define the column relative humidity. Yeah, generally we can define the precipitable water or the column water weight. So there you use the relative humidity, and I was curious how to define it. And also, you know, you use the column relative humidity. That's the only consider whole column, but the vertical distribution of the relative humidity is very important to the precipitation. You need more moisture to for the precipitation, but if more is in the lower level, because you want to generate the cold pool, evaporation of the raindrop is very important. But if the more moist, but there's an influence the evaporation. So yeah, I think how do you consider a vertical distribution of the humidity? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess there's two parts to that, right? So I don't know which direction I should come from. Oh, so anyway, just to be quick, really quick, we're in over time. So the definition is just the as you say the precipitable water versus I guess the saturation precipitable water. So it's like doing, instead of doing relative humidity for a single specific humidity value and a single saturation humidity value, you integrate both of them and then do the ratio of the two.
Okay.
And so the answer to your second question is we're integrating up from the surface until you know, essentially where precipitable water vapor has petered off entirely. And that is a significant choice, as you say, because that includes both in theory, what would be most important to cold pool development is below the cloud base, where you're re-evaporating. And this is but that then includes the cold pool. So I mean that includes the upper troposphere too. So I thought a lot about this, and I think I may now compare them, because I mean we're in the process of revising this. I think I'm going to compare those to see compare where we define the column ending and see. So that's the point is very well taken.
Yeah, I think the easy way maybe you can calculate the relative humidity in different level, the lower level, middle level, higher level, and to understand how they influence the precipitation and the cold pool. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna write it down. I'm gonna steal it.
Yeah, I think it's the time. It's up for the seminar.
Yeah. I just wanted to say thank you so much to our speakers, Dia and Patrick, and also our moderator, Youngji, for having a great webinar today. We just reposted a couple links. One is for abstract submission if you're interested in submitting an abstract to present in this webinar series, and also a feedback form. We're always looking for insights on how we can make this webinar better. And so I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and have a great rest of your day.
Okay, thank you. Have a great day, everyone.